Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void's Edge, and looked at the stars through the massive viewing screen. For 20 years, he had conquered worlds for the Dominion. His fleet had never failed to bring a planet to its knees. Today would be no different. "Sir, Intelligence Officer Mirai has the briefing ready," said his aide, Lieutenant Jinwoo. Hyun nodded and walked to the briefing room. The walls showed holographic images of their next target, a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, with white clouds swirling over green and brown land masses. "This is Earth," Mirai began, pointing at the rotating image. "It's the third planet in what the locals call the Sol system. The species calls themselves humans. What do we know about their military?" Hyun asked, settling into his chair. Mirai touched her control pad and new images appeared. "Their technology is very basic, Commander. They still use chemical rockets for most space travel. Their weapons are primitive, metal projectiles fired by small explosions. No energy weapons, no advanced shields, no faster-than-light communication." Jinwoo leaned forward. "How many ships do they have?" "Maybe 300 combat vessels in total," Mirai replied. "Most are small patrol craft. They have some larger ships, but nothing bigger than our destroyers. Their biggest warship carries less firepower than one of our fighters." Hyun smiled. "This would be easy." "What about their population?" "About 8 billion humans on the main planet. Small colonies on nearby worlds, maybe a few million more. They've only had spaceflight for about 100 years. Very young species. Any special abilities? Psychic powers? Advanced science we should know about?" Hyun had learned to ask these questions. "Some species had surprises," Mirai shook her head. "Nothing, sir. They're completely ordinary. Actually, there is one thing that might interest you. They fight each other constantly. Their entire history is full of wars. They've been killing each other since they learned to make tools." Jinwoo frowned. "That seems dangerous. If they're always fighting, they might be good at war." "Not against us," Mirai laughed. "Sir, they still fight with chemical explosives and metal bullets. One of our plasma cannons could destroy their biggest city. Our shields can stop anything they can shoot at us." Hyun studied the planet one more time. It looked so small and helpless, spinning in the darkness. "How long for full conquest?" "Standard procedure should work perfectly," Mirai said. "Destroy a few military bases from orbit. Land troops in major cities, demand surrender. I estimate 3 days for complete victory." "Good. Signal the fleet." We jumped to the Sol system in 6 hours. The bridge of the Void's Edge became busy with activity. 300 Dominion warships prepared for another easy conquest. They had done this dance so many times before. "Enter a system. Show overwhelming force, accept surrender, add another world to the Dominion." Hyun returned to his quarters and looked at the wall showing his victories. 47 worlds had fallen to his fleet. Some had tried to fight. Others had surrendered immediately. All had joined the Dominion in the end. Earth would be number 48. 6 hours later, the Dominion fleet jumped into the Sol system. Their ships appeared in perfect formation, a wall of dark metal bristling with weapons. Each ship was a work of art, smooth curves and deadly beauty. The biggest ships were over 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack planets. "Sir, we're detecting human activity," reported the sensor officer. "Several ships moving toward us from the inner system." "How many?" Hyun asked. "Difficult to count, sir. They're not in formation. Maybe 50 ships of different sizes." Hyun looked at the tactical display. The human ships looked like junk compared to his fleet. They were all straight lines and ugly angles, like someone had welded metal boxes together. Some looked like cargo ships with weapons stuck on the sides. "Open communications," he ordered. The screen filled with the face of a human female. She had dark hair and wore a simple uniform. Behind her, Hyun could see a ship's bridge that looked primitive and cramped. "I am Admiral Soman of Earth Defense Command," the human said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You are in human space without permission," Hyun almost laughed. This tiny creature was trying to threaten him. "I am Commander Hyun of the 7th Conquest Fleet. You will surrender immediately or we will destroy your world." Admiral Soman's expression didn't change. "Your terms are rejected." "Perhaps you don't understand," Hyun said patiently. "We have 300 warships. You have maybe 50. Our technology is hundreds of years ahead of yours. Surrender now and your people will live as part of the Dominion. Refuse and we will turn your planet into ash." "I understand perfectly," Somin replied. "Do you?" Before Hyun could answer, she cut the communication. "Sir, The human ships are moving into attack formation, Jinwoo reported. Hyun stared at the tactical display. The humans were actually going to fight. It was almost sad. Signal all ships. Destroy one of their vessels. Something big enough to make a point, but don't kill them all yet. They might surrender when they see what our weapons can do. A Dominion cruiser targeted the largest human ship and fired a single plasma bolt. The beam crossed space in seconds and struck the human vessel. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Now signal them again, Hyun ordered. Admiral Somin's face appeared on screen again. She looked exactly the same as before, calm and steady. Behind her, Hyun could see crew members working at their stations as if nothing had happened. That was your largest ship, Hyun said. We destroyed it with one shot. How many more of your people need to die before you surrender? All of them if necessary, Somin replied. What? You asked how many need to die. The answer is all of them, if that's what it takes. She paused and looked directly at him. But the real question is how many of your people are you willing to lose? The communication ended again. Hyun stood in silence for a moment. In his 20 years of conquest, no species had ever responded like this. Most begged for mercy. Some tried to bargain. A few threatened revenge, but none had ever sounded so certain. Sir, the human fleet is advancing, the tactical officer reported. Let them come, Hyun said. All ships prepare for battle. Standard formation. This will be over quickly. But as he watched the human ships approach, something bothered him. They weren't flying in any formation he recognized. They seemed scattered and disorganized, but there was something about their movement that made him uncomfortable. Mirai, scan their ships again. Are we missing something? The intelligence officer worked at her console for several minutes. Sir, their ships are exactly what we thought. Primitive weapons, basic armor, no advanced technology, but what? Sir, they're not flying like any species we've fought before. Look at their formation. It looks random, but I think there might be a pattern. And their ships. Some of them aren't warships at all. That one there is a cargo hauler. That one looks like a mining ship. But they all have weapons now. Hyun studied the approaching fleet. Mirai was right. The humans had turned everything into warships. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, passenger ships all had weapons bolted on somehow. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth, the communications officer said. Put it on screen. This time it wasn't Admiral Somin. It was a different human, an older man in civilian clothes. My name is President Doyun. I speak for all humans. I have a message for your fleet. The man held up a simple metal object. It looked like some kind of tool or weapon, very old and primitive. 300 years ago, a group of humans faced an impossible enemy. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. When the enemy demanded surrender, they sent back a message. Just 2 words, the man smiled. Come and take it. The screen went dark. Hyun felt something he had never experienced in battle before. Not fear exactly, but uncertainty. These humans were not acting like any other species he had conquered. They were not afraid. They were not desperate. They were not even angry. They were eager. All ships, he commanded. Battle stations. Begin the attack. The greatest fleet in Dominion history moved forward to crush a primitive world. But for the first time in 20 years, Commander Hyun was not sure what would happen next. The first battle began at dawn on Earth. As the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, 300 Dominion warships faced off against Admiral Somin's mixed fleet of human vessels. The difference was like watching wolves hunt sheep, or so Commander Hyun thought. Begin the demonstration, Hyun ordered. Target their command ship. The massive guns of the Void's Edge turned toward the largest human vessel. It was ugly compared to Dominion ships, all straight edges and practical design. The plasma cannon, charged with a low hum that vibrated through the bridge. Fire! The beam lanced across space and struck the human ship dead center. The vessel exploded in a bright flash, pieces spinning away into the dark. Hyun waited for the human fleet to break formation and run. Instead, they kept coming. Sir, the humans are not retreating, reported Lieutenant Jinwoo. They're accelerating. On the tactical display, the human ships were moving faster now, closing the distance to the Dominion fleet. Their formation still looked chaotic, but they were definitely attacking. All ships, open fire, Hyun commanded. Selective targeting. Disable their engines. Force them to surrender. The space between the fleets lit up with plasma beams and energy bolts. Dominion weapons were precise and deadly. designed to cripple ships without destroying them completely. Better to capture than destroy. Damaged ships could be repaired and used. The first human ship to take a hit was a converted cargo hauler. The plasma beam struck its engine section, and the ship began to drift, powerless. Hyon expected it to signal surrender or try to escape. Instead, the cargo ship turned toward the nearest Dominion cruiser and kept moving. Its engines were dead, but it still had momentum, and as it got closer, Hyon realized what was happening. "Sir, that ship is on a collision course with the cruiser Dark Star," the tactical officer said. "Warn them off," Hyon ordered. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Put it through." The screen showed the bridge of the cargo hauler. It was full of smoke and sparking electronics. A young human male sat in the captain's chair, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "This is Captain Do-Yun of the merchant vessel Free Wind," he said calmly. "Tell your people this is what happens when you attack our world." The transmission cut off. Seconds later, the cargo ship slammed into the side of the Dominion cruiser. But it wasn't just a collision. The human ship exploded on impact. They had turned their entire vessel into a bomb. The Dark Star was badly damaged, its hull torn open, atmosphere venting into space. It was still functional, but barely. "How did they do that?" Jinwoo asked, staring at the display. Intelligence Officer Mirai was working frantically at her station. "Sir, I think they loaded their cargo bay with explosives before the battle. They turned their ship into a missile." "One ship," Yan said firmly. "They got lucky. Continue the attack." But as the battle continued, it became clear that luck had nothing to do with it. The humans were fighting like no species the Dominion had ever encountered. When their ships were damaged, they didn't try to escape. They used their remaining weapons to do as much damage as possible before they died. When they were outnumbered, they didn't surrender. They worked together in ways that defied tactical logic. Captain Yuna, commanding the destroyer Silent Thunder, watched in amazement as 3 small human patrol craft coordinated an attack on a Dominion battleship. The little ships were fast but lightly armed. They should have been swatted aside easily. Instead, they moved like dancers, each one covering the others, taking turns drawing fire while their companions attacked from different angles. "Their coordination is impossible," Yuna reported to the flagship. "Sir, they're using some kind of communication system we can't detect. They're acting like a single organism instead of separate ships." "Focus fire on the patrol craft," Hyon ordered. "Destroy them." The battleship's guns tracked the human ships, but hitting them was like trying to swat flies with a hammer. They were too fast, too unpredictable. And when one finally took a direct hit and began to break apart, the pilot didn't eject. Instead, he aimed his dying ship at the battleship's bridge and kept firing until the very end. Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out again and again. Human ships that should have been helpless fought with desperate courage. Their weapons were primitive, but they used them cleverly. Their ships were slow and ugly, but they turned that into an advantage somehow. A converted mining ship captained by Kyungmin used its industrial cutting lasers against Dominion armor. The lasers were designed to slice through asteroid rock, not military-grade plating. But the human had modified them somehow. Instead of precise cuts, they now created wide beams that could burn through shield generators. "Sir, we're losing shield coverage on multiple ships," the tactical officer reported. "The humans are targeting our defensive systems specifically." "How do they know where our shield generators are?" Hyon demanded. Mirai looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, I think they've been studying us. Our ship designs, our tactics, our weapons. They know exactly where to hit us." "That's impossible. This is first contact. They've never seen our ships before." "Sir, we've been fighting other species for decades. We've conquered 47 worlds. What if the humans somehow got recordings of those battles? What if they've been preparing for us?" The thought was disturbing. No species had ever studied the Dominion before fighting them. Most didn't even know the Dominion existed until the conquest fleets arrived in their systems. On the tactical display, the human fleet was taking heavy losses. More than half their ships had been destroyed or disabled. But the survivors kept fighting, and they were learning fast. Hyon watched as a group of human fighters changed their attack pattern mid-battle, adapting to Dominion defensive fire. "Sir, we have a problem," Captain Yuna reported from the Silent Thunder. "My ship is under attack by what appears to be an unarmed civilian transport." "Destroy it," Jan ordered. "Sir, it's not shooting at us. It's ramming us. The transport is loaded with some kind of explosive cargo. My shields are down and it's coming straight for my engine room." Hyun watched the tactical display as the civilian ship, captained by someone called Tae-hyun, slammed into the destroyer. The explosion was massive, far bigger than any normal ship could produce. When the fire cleared, the Silent Thunder was drifting powerless. "How many ships have we lost?" Hyun asked quietly. 17 destroyed, 32 damaged, Jinwoo reported. "Sir, we're winning, but the cost is much higher than expected." "And the humans?" 41 ships destroyed, maybe 10 still fighting. Hyun studied the battlefield. By all normal measures, the Dominion had won. The human fleet was almost completely destroyed, but somehow, it didn't feel like victory. His ships were damaged, his crews were shaken, and the few remaining human vessels were still fighting as hard as ever. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Soman." The human commander appeared on screen again. Her ship's bridge looked even worse than before, sparking control panels, smoke in the air, crew members working to repair battle damage. But Soman herself looked calm and determined. "Commander Hyun," she said, "you've destroyed most of my fleet. Congratulations, you've won this battle." "Then you surrender?" "I surrender this battle," Soman replied. "But the war is just beginning. You came here expecting easy victory over a primitive species. How does it feel to bleed?" Jan looked around his bridge. Several stations were damaged from the fighting. His crew looked tired and stressed. In 20 years of conquest, he had never seen his people so shaken after a single battle. "You cannot win," he said to the screen. "We have more ships, better weapons, superior technology." "Maybe," Soman agreed. "But we have something you don't." "What's that?" Admiral Soman smiled, and for the first time, Hyun saw something in her eyes that made him uncomfortable. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was anticipation. "We have home field advantage, and we've been preparing for this fight our entire lives." The transmission ended, leaving Hyun alone with his thoughts and his damaged fleet. They had won the battle, but at a cost no Dominion fleet had ever paid before, and somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. Looking at Earth spinning peacefully below them, Hyun realized that Admiral Soman was right. This was the humans' home. They knew every asteroid, every moon, every hiding place in this system. And if the first battle was any indication, they had been preparing for war in ways the Dominion couldn't understand. For the first time in his career, Commander Hyun wondered if he had bitten off more than he could chew. 2 days after the space battle, Commander Hyun ordered the ground invasion of Earth. His remaining fleet moved into orbit around the blue planet, weapons trained on major cities. The plan was simple: land troops in population centers, secure key locations, and force the humans to surrender. Major Changmin led the first assault force down to Earth's surface. His dropships descended through the atmosphere toward a city called Seoul, their hulls glowing from the heat of entry. Inside each ship, Dominion soldiers checked their weapons and armor one final time. "Remember, these are primitives," Changmin told his troops over the communication system. "Their weapons cannot penetrate our armor. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Stay in formation, secure the city center, and wait for surrender." The dropships landed in a wide plaza surrounded by tall buildings. Changmin was the first to step onto Earth soil, his boots crunching on strange gray stone. The city around them looked empty and quiet. Too quiet. "Spread out," he ordered. "Secure the perimeter." His soldiers moved through the empty streets in perfect formation, their energy weapons ready. The buildings were tall but primitive, made of concrete and glass instead of advanced materials. Everything looked crude compared to Dominion architecture. They had walked 3 blocks when the first shot rang out. The bullet struck Changmin's armor and bounced off harmlessly, but the sound echoed off the buildings like thunder. More shots followed from windows, rooftops, and doorways. The humans were using chemical projectile weapons, bullets fired by small explosions, All units, return fire, Changmin commanded. Dominion energy weapons lit up the street, burning holes through walls and windows. But the human fighters didn't stand still to be shot. They fired a few rounds and then moved to new positions, always. Staying hidden, always attacking from unexpected directions. "Sir, we can't get a clear target," reported Sergeant Haewon. "They shoot and disappear before we can respond." Changmin frowned. This wasn't how ground combat was supposed to work. Other species either fought in the open where Dominion weapons could destroy them easily, or they surrendered when they realized resistance was hopeless. These humans were doing something different. A man appeared in a window across the street. He was older, with gray hair, wearing simple civilian clothes. But he held a weapon, and his eyes were steady and calm. "Surrender," Changmin called out in the human language. "Your weapons cannot hurt us." The man, later they would learn his name was Jeho, smiled and raised his weapon. Instead of shooting at the Dominion soldiers, he aimed at something behind them. The shot struck a gas line running under the street. The explosion knocked half the squad to the ground and filled the air with fire and debris. When the smoke cleared, Jeho was gone. "How did he know about the gas line?" Haewon asked, helping another soldier to his feet. "Lucky guess," Changmin replied, but he didn't believe it. The fighting continued through the day. The humans used the city itself as a weapon. They knew where every pipe, every cable, every weak point in every building could be found. When Dominion forces entered a building, the humans would collapse the stairs or bring down the ceiling. When they tried to use vehicles, the humans would attack from storm drains and subway tunnels. By evening, Changmin's force had barely moved 6 blocks from their landing site. They had taken no significant casualties. Their armor was too good, and their weapons too powerful for the primitive human attacks to cause real damage. But they weren't making progress either. "Sir, we're receiving reports from other landing sites," his communications officer reported. "Same situation everywhere. The humans won't stand and fight, but they won't retreat either." Changmin studied a map of the city. According to orbital scans, Seoul had a population of nearly 10 million humans. But the streets seemed empty except for the fighters who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. "Where is everyone?" he wondered aloud. The answer came the next morning. Changmin's force was moving through what had been identified as a residential district when they found something strange. An entire neighborhood that showed no signs of life. No movement, no heat signatures, nothing. "Spread out and search the buildings," Changmin ordered. The soldiers moved from house to house, kicking in doors and searching rooms. Every building was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. Furniture, clothes, food, personal belongings. It looked like the entire population had simply vanished. "Sir, you need to see this," Sergeant Haewon called from a large building in the center of the district. Changmin entered what appeared to be a school. The hallways were clean and empty, children's artwork still hanging on the walls. But something felt wrong. The building was too quiet, too perfect. "Sir, look at this," Haewon said, pointing to a wall near the entrance. Someone had written a message in the human language. Changmin's translator device rendered it into Dominion script. "If you're reading this, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time." "What does that mean?" Haewon asked. Before Changmin could answer, they heard a sound, a soft beeping coming from somewhere in the building. The Major's blood went cold as he realized what it meant. Everyone out, now. The Dominion soldiers ran for the exits as the beeping got faster. They made it 50 meters from the building before it exploded. The blast was enormous, far bigger than any weapon the humans were supposed to have. The school and 3 neighboring buildings disappeared in a ball of fire that could be seen from orbit. When the smoke cleared, Major Changmin stood in the rubble and realized the truth. The humans hadn't abandoned this district. They had evacuated it specifically to create a trap. They had wired entire city blocks with explosives and waited for the Dominion forces to walk into the middle of it. "How many dead?" he asked his communications officer. 15 soldiers lost, sir, 20 more injured." Changmin stared at the burning ruins. In his 10 years of service, he had never lost so many troops in a single engagement. And the worst part was that it hadn't been a battle. It had been a trap set by a species that was supposed to be primitive and desperate. His communicator crackled to life. Major, this is Commander Hyon. Report your status. Sir, we've encountered heavy resistance. The humans are using unconventional tactics. Explain. Changmin looked around at the destruction. How could he explain that an entire city seemed to be a weapon? That every street corner and building was potentially a trap? That the humans fought like they had been planning for this war their entire lives? Sir, they're not fighting the way other species fight. They don't try to hold ground or protect important buildings. They evacuate areas and then destroy them when we enter. They turn their own cities into battlefields and seem comfortable fighting in the ruins. There was a long pause before Hyon responded. Are you saying they're winning? Sir, we're not losing. Our armor protects us from their weapons and we have superior firepower. But we're not winning either. For every block we secure, they destroy 2 more. At this rate, we'll conquer a planet of rubble and ash. From orbit, Hyon could see the smoke rising from a dozen cities around the world. Similar battles were being fought everywhere Dominion forces had landed. His troops were reporting the same thing. Humans who fought like the very ground beneath their feet was a weapon. Dr. Yunji, a human scientist, was working in a hidden laboratory deep beneath the city of Busan. She had been expecting this invasion for months, ever since Earth's deep space sensors had detected the Dominion fleet approaching their system. While Admiral Soman prepared the space defenses, Yunji had been working on something else, understanding the enemy. Analysis complete, she said to her assistant, Nari. I've studied the recordings from our space battle and the ground fighting. The Dominion follows predictable patterns. What kind of patterns? Yunji pointed to a holographic display showing Dominion ship formations and troop movements. They're very good at what they do, but they do the same thing every time. They expect other species to fight the way they fight. Formations, fixed positions, conventional tactics. But we don't fight that way. Exactly. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know every dirty trick, every unconventional tactic, every way to turn weakness into strength. They've conquered species that were either too peaceful or too rigid in their thinking. They've never fought someone like us. Nari studied the data. What do you mean, someone like us? Yunji smiled grimly. Nari, what's the one thing every human civilization has in common throughout our history? War. War. We've been at war with each other, with our environment, with everything since we learned to pick up sticks and hit things with them. We don't just know how to fight. We know how to fight when we're losing. How to turn retreat into attack. How to make the enemy pay for every meter of ground. How to keep fighting even when victory seems impossible. She pulled up another display, showing human military history. Thousands of years of conflict, tactics, and innovation born from desperation. The Dominion has superior technology, Yunji continued. But they've never fought a species that considers war to be a natural state of existence. They've never faced an enemy that sees every defeat as a lesson and every victory as preparation for the next battle. Above ground, the war continued. Major Changmin's forces had finally secured the center of Seoul, but at enormous cost. 6 months had passed since the Dominion first arrived at Earth, and Commander Hyon was beginning to understand what fear felt like. His once mighty fleet now numbered fewer than 150 ships. Not destroyed in glorious battle, but worn down piece by piece, day by day, by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. Communications Officer Tae-hyun brought him the daily reports from across Dominion space. The news was disturbing. Sir, we're receiving reports of uprisings on Kepler 442b, Tae-hyun said, his voice tight with worry. The Zelans have attacked 3 Dominion outposts. They're using human tactics, hit-and-run explosives, turning their cities into traps. Casualties? Hyon asked, though he dreaded the answer. 57 Dominion administrators dead, sir. The Zelans broadcast recordings of the attacks across their planet. They're calling it liberation in the human style. Hyon closed his eyes. The Zelans had been conquered 8 years ago. They had surrendered quickly and served the Dominion faithfully since then. Now they were rebelling, inspired by news of human resistance. What about Proxima Centauri? The Greys have declared independence, sir. They've seized our mining facilities and are demanding we leave their system immediately. And sir, Tae-hyun paused. What? They've built weapons using human designs. Somehow they got detailed specifications for the explosives and tactics Earth forces have been using against us. Hyun felt a chill run down his spine. The humans weren't just fighting the Dominion. They were sharing their knowledge with other species, teaching them how to resist. On Earth's moon, General Minho coordinated the human counteroffensive from a hidden base buried deep under the lunar surface. His command center was a marvel of improvised engineering. Human technology merged with captured Dominion equipment in ways that should have been impossible. Status report, Minho said to his staff officers. Captain Wubin, in charge of captured enemy technology, stepped forward. Sir, we've successfully reverse-engineered their plasma weapons. Our version isn't as elegant as the original, but it hits twice as hard. How is that possible? Asked Colonel Seong-ho. Dominion weapons are designed for precision and efficiency, Wubin explained. But we don't care about precision. We modified the power cores to overload on purpose. Their weapons are scalpels, ours are hammers. Minho nodded approvingly. What about ship construction? We've launched 15 new vessels this month, reported Admiral Soman, appearing on the communications screen from her mobile command post. They're built from captured Dominion hulls with human modifications. Faster engines, heavier armor, and weapons that would make Dominion engineers have nightmares. Speaking of nightmares, Seong-ho said, we need to discuss the psychological warfare reports. Minho turned to face him. Throughout human history, they had learned that sometimes the enemy's mind was a more important battlefield than any planet or star system. The Dominion soldiers are showing signs of what they call combat stress. Seong-ho continued. Their medical officer, someone named Nari, has been requesting additional psychiatric support. Apparently, our fighting methods are causing problems they've never dealt with before. What kind of problems? Their troops expect enemies to surrender when facing superior firepower. They expect conventional tactics and predictable behavior. Instead, they're fighting an enemy that seems to welcome death and turns every defeat into a weapon. Admiral Salmon's image smiled grimly. Their soldiers have been trained to conquer civilized worlds. But we're not civilized. We're feral. From his hidden asteroid base, Captain Ji-hoon led a squadron of modified human ships on raids throughout the solar system. His vessels were barely recognizable as Earth technology. Sleek hulls merged with human engineering in ways that created something entirely new. Target acquired, reported his pilot Kyung-min. Dominion supply convoy, 3 freighters with light escort. Remember the plan, Ji-hoon said over the communication system. We don't just steal their supplies, we make sure they know we were here. The human ships struck fast and hard. Instead of destroying the convoy, they disabled the ships, took what they needed, and left a message painted on the hull of each vessel. Compliments of Earth Defense Force. But the real psychological impact came from how they fought. Kyung-min's ship had been severely damaged in the attack, engines failing and life support compromised. Instead of retreating, she aimed her dying vessel at the largest Dominion escort ship and activated the emergency overload on her power core. The explosion destroyed both ships, but not before Kyung-min transmitted a final message to the surviving Dominion vessels. Tell your fleet we're just getting started. Back on the Void's edge, Intelligence Officer Mirai presented her analysis to Commander Hyun. Her report made for disturbing reading. Sir, I've been studying human military doctrine for 6 months now, she began. I finally understand what we're fighting. Explain. The humans don't see this as a war in the way we understand war. For them, this is just Tuesday. Hyun frowned. I don't understand. Sir, human history is one continuous war. They've been fighting something or someone for their entire existence as a species. War isn't an aberration for them, it's their natural state. They don't have a military doctrine separate from their civilian culture because their entire culture is military doctrine. Mirai brought up a holographic display showing human civilization. Look at their languages, sir. Humans have over 6,000 different languages, and every single one contains detailed vocabulary for warfare, tactics, and violence. They have hundreds of different words just for describing ways to fight, so they're naturally violent. We knew that. No, sir, it's more than that. They're not just violent, they're adaptive. Every time they fight each other, they learn. Every defeat teaches them new tactics. Every victory shows them new possibilities. They've been training for this war for 10,000 years, fighting every possible enemy except us. Hyun studied the data. It was true that humans seemed to learn from every encounter. Tactics that worked against them once never worked again. There's more, sir, Mireille continued. I've analyzed their communication patterns during battle. They don't just coordinate, they innovate in real time. Watch this. The display showed a recent battle where human forces had faced a new Dominion weapon system. Instead of retreating or calling for orders, the human soldiers had immediately begun experimenting with countermeasures. Within hours, they had developed effective responses and shared them with every other human unit in the system. Sir, we're not fighting an army. We're fighting a species that treats war as an educational exercise. The breaking point came 3 days later. Lieutenant Sunhee was leading a patrol through the ruins of what had once been Tokyo when her unit was ambushed by human resistance fighters. The attack was swift and brutal. Explosives hidden in rubble, snipers in bombed-out buildings, fighters who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. But this ambush was different. The humans weren't just trying to kill Dominion soldiers, they were trying to capture them alive. Sir, we're surrounded, reported Sergeant Haywan over the communications link. The humans have us pinned down in a subway station. They're demanding we surrender. Negative, Sunhee replied. Fight your way out. Ma'am, they're not trying to kill us. Every shot has been carefully aimed to disable our equipment, not harm us personally. I think they want to take prisoners. The idea of surrendering to primitive aliens was unthinkable. Dominion forces had never surrendered to anyone. But as energy blasts scorched the air around them, and human voices called for their surrender in broken Dominion language, Sunhee realized they might not have a choice. The humans who emerged from the shadows were led by a man who identified himself as Jeho. He was older, with graying hair and calm eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried a primitive weapon, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had been fighting his entire life. I'm offering you terms, Jeho said in carefully pronounced Dominion language. Surrender your weapons and you will be treated according to the laws of war. What laws of war? Sunhee demanded. Jeho smiled sadly. Human laws of war. We've had thousands of years to develop them. Later, when the captured Dominion soldiers were returned in a prisoner exchange, they reported something that chilled every officer who heard it. The humans had treated them well, better than Dominion forces treated their own prisoners. They had been fed, given medical care, and allowed to send messages to their families. But more disturbing was what they had learned during their captivity. The human resistance wasn't just fighting in the cities where Dominion forces had landed. They were fighting everywhere, coordinating attacks across the entire planet through communication networks the Dominion couldn't detect or disrupt. Sir, reported Medical Officer Nari, we need to discuss the mental health of our troops. Commander Hyon looked at the psychiatrist with tired eyes. What's the problem? Sir, our soldiers are experiencing something we've never seen before. They're afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of an enemy that doesn't behave like an enemy should. Sir, Dominion doctrine is based on overwhelming force leading to quick surrender. Our troops are trained to be occupiers, not to fight a war of attrition against an opponent who sees death as just another tactic. Nari pulled up medical reports showing stress indicators among the fleet personnel. Sir, we have soldiers who re-1 year after the Dominion fleet first arrived at Earth. Commander Hyon received orders that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of the campaign. The message came directly from the Dominion High Command, encrypted with the highest security codes. Commander Hyon, you are authorized to begin negotiations for a ceasefire. Terms are to be acceptable to human leadership. Hyon read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. The Dominion, for the first time in their history, was asking for peace terms from a species they had tried to conquer. His fleet now numbered only 73 ships, less than a quarter of the force that had arrived at Earth. But the losses weren't just in ships and soldiers. They were losing the war for control of the galaxy itself. 15 worlds had declared independence inspired by human resistance. 3 more had formally allied with Earth. The Dominion's empire was cracking, and Earth was the hammer breaking it apart, sir. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Somin, reported Communications Officer Tae-hyun. Put her through. Admiral Somin appeared on the main screen, but she wasn't calling from her flagship. Behind her, Hyon could see the bridge of what looked like a Dominion cruiser, but modified with human technology. The combination should have been impossible. Human engineering merged with Dominion precision in ways that created something entirely new. Commander Hyon, Somin said, I understand you want to discuss terms. The Dominion is prepared to offer a ceasefire, Hyun replied carefully. We can negotiate boundaries, establish neutral zones, perhaps arrange for compensation for damages. Admiral Soman smiled, and Hyun felt his blood run cold. It was the same expression she'd worn during their first conversation over a year ago. Calm, confident, and completely without fear. Commander, you seem to have misunderstood the situation. This isn't a negotiation. This is a surrender demand. I'm sorry, what? The terms are simple. Complete withdrawal of all Dominion forces from Earth space and all human allied systems. Immediate release of all human prisoners and captured technology. Reparations to be paid to worlds damaged during Dominion conquest. And formal recognition of Earth as the protector of free worlds. Hyun stared at the screen in shock. Admiral, you cannot be serious. You're demanding that the Dominion surrender to you? Yes. We still have over 70 warships. You have, maybe 30 vessels? Actually, we have 147 combat-ready ships as of this morning, Soman corrected. But numbers aren't really the point anymore, are they? She was right, and Hyun knew it. Captain Ji-hoon's raiders had spread throughout Dominion space, not just attacking supply lines, but teaching other species how to fight back. Colonel Seong-ho was training resistance movements on a dozen worlds. Most importantly, the myth of Dominion invincibility was shattered forever. You cannot win a war against the entire Dominion, Hyun said desperately. Commander, we've already won. The war is over. The only question now is whether you accept reality peacefully, or whether we have to demonstrate it more forcefully. To prove her point, Admiral Soman transmitted tactical data to the Dominion flagship. The information showed human fleets moving through space toward Dominion territory, not just Earth ships, but vessels from formerly conquered worlds flying under human tactical command. As we speak, Soman continued, Captain Wubin is leading a liberation fleet toward your mining colonies in the Tau Ceti system. Captain Kyungmin has established a forward base in what used to be Dominion space near Proxima Centauri. General Minho's forces are training 3 different species in advanced resistance techniques. The tactical display showed the true scope of human expansion. They weren't just defending Earth anymore, they were liberating the galaxy. How? Ian asked quietly. How what? How did you do this? Your technology was primitive. Your numbers were small. You should have lost this war in the first week. Admiral Soman was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Commander, your people developed spaceflight and advanced technology, then learned to fight wars. But humans learned to fight wars first, then developed technology to help us fight better wars. Every human invention, from agriculture to space travel, was created by people who expected to need it in the next conflict. She gestured to the modified bridge around her. Your ships are beautiful, elegant, efficient. Our ships are ugly, crude, and practical. But when we captured your technology, we didn't just copy it. We improved it. We made it more reliable, more powerful, more flexible. Because for us, every tool is a weapon, and every weapon needs to work when everything goes wrong. Dr. Yoonji's voice came through the communication link from her laboratory deep below Earth's surface. Her research had been crucial to understanding Dominion technology and psychology. Commander Hyun, she said, I've spent a year studying your species and your empire. Do you want to know what your fundamental weakness is? Tell me. You expect other species to think like you do. You assume that when faced with superior force, rational beings will surrender. You cannot understand a species that sees impossible odds as merely another tactical problem to solve. Engineer Haewon's modifications to captured Dominion technology had been key to human success. She had taken precise, elegant Dominion systems and turned them into crude but effective weapons of war. Sir, Haewon said, appearing on a secondary screen, we've been broadcasting technical specifications to every world in Dominion space. Detailed instructions for building weapons, establishing communication networks, and coordinating resistance movements. Your former subjects now have access to the same knowledge that helped us fight back. Hyun realized the full scope of what had happened. The humans hadn't just defeated the Dominion fleet at Earth. They had started a galactic revolution. Every world that had ever been conquered now had the tools and knowledge needed to fight for independence. The surrender terms stand, Admiral Soman said firmly. You have 24 hours to respond. The transmission ended, leaving Hyun alone with his remaining officers. Lieutenant Jinwoo, who had served with him for 10 years, looked exhausted and defeated. Sir, what are your orders? Jan looked around the bridge of his flagship. Many of the control stations showed battle damage that had never been fully repaired. His crew looked tired and stressed. In the past year, they had learned what it meant to fight an enemy that never gave up. Sir, Intelligence Officer Mireille said quietly, I've been monitoring communications across the galaxy. 17 more worlds have declared independence in the past week. The Vegan system has formally allied with Earth. The Centauri colonies are building ships using human designs. How many loyal worlds does the Dominion still control? Jan asked. Perhaps 30, sir. Maybe fewer. From an empire of over 100 worlds to 30 in just 1 year. All because they had tried to conquer a small blue planet, whose inhabitants refused to accept defeat. The final irony came 20 hours later. Jan was preparing to accept the human surrender terms when he received an emergency transmission from the Dominion homeworld itself. The image that appeared on his screen showed Dominion capital cities burning and alien ships in the skies above them. Commander Jan, said the panicked voice of a Dominion military coordinator. The capital is under attack. Human ships and allied forces have broken through our defenses. They're demanding our immediate surrender. Admiral Soman had played her final card. While negotiating with Hyan at Earth, she had secretly coordinated a direct assault on the Dominion homeworld itself. The species that had conquered the galaxy was now facing conquest in their own system. Terms are simple, came Admiral Soman's voice over the communication link. Immediate cessation of all hostilities, complete withdrawal from conquered territories, war crimes tribunals for Dominion leadership, and establishment of a new galactic order based on freedom rather than conquest. Commander Hyan looked at his officers one final time. Major Changman, who had learned to fear empty buildings and quiet streets. Captain Yuna, whose destroyer had been rammed by desperate human pilots. Medical Officer Nari, who had treated Dominion soldiers driven to breakdown by fighting an enemy that welcomed death. Signal all ships, Jan said quietly. Stand down, weapons. Signal Admiral Soman that we accept her terms. Sir? Jinwoo asked in confusion. It's over, Lieutenant. We lost this war the moment we tried to fight a species that had been preparing for us their entire evolutionary history. 6 months later, Commander Hyan stood in a human courtroom on Earth, not as a prisoner but as a witness in the war crimes tribunals. The humans had kept their word. Captured Dominion personnel were treated according to human laws of war, which were surprisingly fair and humane. Admiral Soman sat across from him during a break in the proceedings. I have a question, Jan said. Why didn't you destroy us? Your ships had enough firepower to glass our homeworld. Why show mercy? Admiral Soman considered the question carefully. Commander, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that the best victory isn't the one where you destroy your enemy, it's the one where you turn your enemy into an ally. She gestured toward the courtroom, where former Dominion officers were testifying about war crimes committed during the conquest campaigns.